This is Chicken Philosophy, the Meccan Revelations, part 78, in which I will pick up right where Frater BT left off in part 77. If this is your first time on Meccan Revelations on Chicken Philosophy, then I would invite you to check out the playlist, the Meccan Revelations playlist. You can start with episode 1 if you'd like. You can just look up and down the playlist and find an interesting looking thumbnail if you want to. Alright. Cool. Yeah. Today's beverage is some spearmint tea is this a wine glass? Is that what this is? Cheers. And the incense for today is some sandalwood. So sandalwood and spearmint, if you want to key in to the taste and the smell of today's episode and the sound of the lighter clicking because I forgot to light the candle. Yeah, so lately Meccan Revelations, like I think last time in part 77, we finally actually got to the Ibn Arabi talking, which was really nice. Partly because from the 100 years of Michel Chodkowitz's introduction, it made it seem like it was going in one direction. But then once Ibn Arabi started talking, it kind of went in another direction. And that was interesting. I think it's the Michel Chodkowitz, he's the editor and whatever, and the head of the French People Interested in Sufi Things Society or whatever. I mean, I think he passed away, but if you didn't, hi Michel, sorry I said you passed away. What are we talking about? It doesn't matter. Yeah, last time it was something along the lines of that it was interesting that regardless of the fact that he's talking about Sharia law, I mean, Sharia means law, so it's like polycanon. Poly means canon, so polycanon means canon. Sharia law means law. So what can you do? But the point is that he was more talking about like an approach toward interpreting when laws seem to contradict, or when passages seem to contradict. And it was interesting to observe that Lord Buddha, who was a prince before he went off and became a holy man, had a very specific, regimented approach toward establishing rules and laws. And it was like a huge chunk of, the oral tradition that became the literature of the earliest Sangha was the rules and the minute, and the subsections. So he didn't leave very much room for ambiguity. Where in Islam, it seems, based on just kind of this indirect view of hearing Ibn Arabi talk about approaches toward interpreting, it seems like when it comes to approaching, well, what does the Quran say? Well, it doesn't come up. Okay, what does the Hadith say or do? Is it plural? There was a similar thing that came up. Okay, well, let's look at that similar thing. Okay, so based on this and based on that, we can interpret it this way and say that the law is this. And then, of course, along comes someone else, the next caliphate over, saying, oh, yeah, we had a similar discussion over here, and we came up with a different law. But they both, believe that they're coming from, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's just interesting. If you're going to start a movement, you might think about working out those rules early. If you're going to have rules, I don't know. I don't know if maybe this doesn't even apply in present day, or maybe it does. Anyway, so it's interesting, like, to kind of look at Ibn Arabi. Well, what would Ibn Arabi say about interpreting the Constitution? What would Ibn Arabi say about interpreting, this and that? So it's a little bit more. It's a little bit less, like, narrow. Obviously, if you're looking at a person's very, very, very specific circumstances, it's like, well, if you're in 1842 in Hamburg and you're having a conversation on this particular subject and you just had a shot of Jägermeister or whatever they drank, then this is the specific sentence that you would say, but we can apply it to our world today. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't need to be... You can, if you want to. I mean, I enjoy both approaches. Both what and what? Well, both seeing something in the abstract and seeing if it applies generally, and observing it in its specific time and place and moment, and holding both of those things. So, anyway, I don't know. Whatever. All right. So, but before we get to that, as always, we're going to visit our Iranian friend, Hafiz, Persian, whatever, same, who wrote poetry 600 or 700 years ago, and it's often good. So we'll let the synchronicity decide for those who are watching some of the other programs. All right, you ready? Oh, glasses might help. There we go. Stay with us. You leave our company when you speak of shame, and this makes everyone in the tavern sad. Stay with us as we do the hardest work of rarely laying down that pick and shovel that will keep revealing our deeper kinship with God, that will keep revealing our own divine worth. You leave the company of the beloved's friends when you speak of guilt, and this makes everyone in the tavern very sad. Stay with us tonight as we weave love and reveal ourselves as his precious garments. It's good. I like it. The only thing that I would personal preference is, are you really your clothes? No? Then how can you say that you're the garments of God? I heard someone say that we're the sensory organs of God. Do you identify yourself as your mouth, eyes, nose, ears, and fingers? Is that you? Anyway, all right, enough about that silliness. All right, so now we have original status. You ready? It is not permissible to interpret divine will on the basis of personal opinion.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Thank you, the dude. By which I mean a point of view expressed in the absence of proof or reasoning from the book or the Sunnah, or based on Ijma.
That's just like your opinion, man.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Jeff. All right. Different time, different place, different groupthink. Even if I, personally, do not use reasoning by analogy, I do not fault the individual who considers it valid if the cause common to the two things between which the analogy is being established is clear and understandable, and it seems probable that it is what the lawgiver had in mind. No, I forbid myself to use qiyas, which is reasoning by analogy, only because it leads to increasing number of explicit prescriptions. I have understood that the lawgiver wished for this community's burden to be lightened. The prophet said, quote, "Leave me alone as long as I leave you alone," end quote. Yeah, where Lord Buddha was like, okay, what's the issue? So he wanted to ejaculate, but he was trying to ejaculate blue, so he thinks that's a loophole around don't make yourself ejaculate with your hand. Okay, let it be known from here on out that even if you are trying to ejaculate blue and it comes out some other color, which color? All right. If you're trying to ejaculate blue and it comes out red, that's against the rules. If you're trying to ejaculate blue and it comes out yellow, that's against the rules. I'm not exaggerating. This stuff is all in the ancient scriptures. It's, covering all the loopholes. So the need to reason by analogy in establishing laws comes from the fact that rather than being open to continually establishing new laws, like Lord Buddha was, the Prophet Muhammad, blessed be he, was like, "Leave me alone! Stop it! Stop talking to me about this." And Ibn Arabi, with the seal of Mohammedan sainthood, is coming from a similar, actually, place where he's like, yeah, there's no specific law against or for that, so I would have to squint and kind of go, Like when coffee became popular, there were caliphates that were like, I love this, and there's clearly nothing forbidding the drinking of coffee, right? So, but then there were other caliphates that were like, when we drink this, we become excited, we talk more, we argue more, we have these intense debates, we sweat a little. Sounds to me similar to alcohol, and alcohol is forbidden, right? So coffee is forbidden. It's from Shatem, right? But then you walk a little bit that way, and it's like, hey, welcome to this Northern African kingdom or whatever. Have a coffee, and it's just right. Never mind. Lord Buddha was very... well, actually, he said that you can't drink a strong drink unless it... but, like, strong drink can be part of the recipe of food? And I'm like, what? So, okay. But that kind of made a light bulb go off, because when I was in Bhutan, they had this sake for when the whatever ranking level of monk, the abbot of the local monastery, would come visit, then you'd offer him some sake with egg in it, like scrambled egg floating around, like the golden Goldschlager. Anybody remember? Is that still a thing? No, it wasn't that small, but there was egg in it, and you like, oh, this is good sake. Oh, and chewy. It's just like chewing scrambled eggs in the middle of your sake. I got so drunk in Bhutan, at least 3 times. What? Yeah. So I think that might have been, I don't know, like the Vajrayana in that part of the world is kind of distant from the laws of pre-sectarian early Buddhism, but there is some nodding toward it. It's sort of like how, Protestant Christianity, let alone, or any kind of Christianity, Catholic or Orthodox, is kind of far from the rules in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, except for sometimes when they decide to get all serious about one of them. But like one of the earliest things was like, because of that whole, there was all this drama between Peter and Paul about shellfish or about eating whatever. If it's on the plate, eat it. Doesn't matter. And Peter was like, okay, well, that's all good for you, but I'm going to be kosher. Kind of, I won't draw attention to it, but Paul took him aside and was like, people are noticing that you're being kosher, and they're going to think that they need to be kosher. So stop being kosher for Jesus. You got to stop it. And Peter was like, oh, all right. So yeah, so kosher meaning obeying the laws of the Old Testament, So, which laws are you supposed to obey and not obey? Well, get the council together and have a debate, a meeting, and reason by analysis, and then you can decide to invent this, like, when the Holy Spirit is with the bishops, then that's just like Jesus being there. So there you go. But anyway, back to this other stuff. That is a bumblebee. Something large. And he reproached those who quizzed him for fear he might reveal some new prescription that the community would be incapable of respecting, like staying awake during the night during Ramadan, performing the pilgrimage every year, or something of the sort. Thus, when I saw what was at issue here, I forbade qiyas in matters of religion. Neither the prophet nor God himself commanded its use in legal matters. Abandoning it is thus an obligation for me, since it is something the prophet condemned. The original status of things is the absence of legal obligation. See, there are gems in this, even though the subject matter is kind of like, let me read that line again. The original status of things, is in bracket parentheses, is the absence of legal obligation. Yes, the original status. Oingo Boingo, could you put that in some other words?
Animals came from miles around, so tired of walking so close to the ground. They needed a change, that's what they said. Life is better walking on two legs, but they were in for a big surprise, because they didn't know the law. It's the law. No spoon line. What is the law? No spoon line.
It's not exactly the same, because it implies that the law was there, they just didn't know it. But that's a funny way of an ironic spin take on things. All right. What? Imitation of the deeds and gestures of the prophet is not an obligation. If it were, it would amount to the heaviest of burdens. Have you met Jesus? Sorry. Happy Easter, by the way. That was yesterday. Except when it comes to an act that we are specifically prescribed to perform in order to obey God, in which case the act is obligatory. For example, when he said, quote, "Pray as you see me pray, and take your rights from me," end quote. All right. Or in matters concerning the different parts of the pilgrimage. If there were not details concerning certain specific actions, performing them would not be an obligation for us. The prophet was a man subject to emotions, as are all men. What? Yes, he could feel satisfaction. And anger, just like anyone else. We are only expected to imitate him in actions and deeds when he expressly commanded us to do so, and he was ordered not to perform any action of this nature in secret, so that he could be seen by others, just as when he received the order to transmit, it was incumbent upon him not to say what he had heard while he was alone, because no one would be there to hear it and to communicate the content of the revelation to others who had not heard. Okay. We are not obligated to follow any religious laws previous to ours, except in those cases where our own law has confirmed them, despite the fact that they are authentically sacred laws for the communities to which they were addressed, and we do not accuse them of being false. See, that's a little, I kind of like that. I dig that. I mean, aside from the fact that this is all like internal affairs, they're not talking about anybody who's not Muslim, right? But within that world, if, you know, you're here and you're drinking coffee because it's legal, and then you go over there and you can't drink it because it's illegal, then you respect their law and you don't say that their laws are false. You just say, oh, that's how they've interpreted the law here, so that's the law here, right? I mean, I think in private, like, you know, conversation, everybody has those conversations in the kitchen, you know, kind of thing. Water cooler, a little bit whispering, like, you might be like, I think they might have gotten it wrong here. Coffee's fine, isn't it? You know, like, whatever. Okay, never mind. Yes, right. Well, he was alone. We are not obligated, despite the fact that, okay. Quite the contrary. We believe in God, in his messenger, and in what was revealed to him, but also in the books and the laws that were revealed before him. The but also was in bracket parentheses, which changed the meaning of the sentence, but whatever. Okay. Blind conformity to the opinion of another is not permissible in matters of religion, in our opinion, regardless of whether the individual is dead or still living. In fact, it is incumbent upon the individual who questions a scholar to tell him, quote, I want to know what God or his messenger prescribed on such and such an issue, end quote. If the individual questioned replies, quote, here is the divine prescription on this matter, end quote, or, quote, here is his messenger's, end quote, the questioner should put it into practice, because the respondent in this case is merely a reporter of God's decision for us, or of his prophet. What if he's talking out of his mind and doesn't point at the scripture and say, because, see, right here. I don't know, whatever. You just have to remember to phrase it that way, then everybody will do what you say. No. On the other hand, when the person questioned says, quote, here is my opinion, or Rayi, end quote, or this is the way I see the matter, end quote, or even, quote, I do not know what the procedure is for this question. However, an analogous judgment shows that the status is the same in regard to this question as for the one uttered in regard to such and such other question, end quote, reasoning by analogy, which Ibn Arabi does not do. In this case, it is not licit for the person who asked the question to take the opinion into consideration. He must, so the jury can strike that from your... He must thus seek out men of memory and question them in the matter we have described. It is the duty of every Muslim not to question individuals other than either these, meaning the men of the Quran, so al-Dicker, meaning the men of the Quran. God said, quote, it is indeed we who revealed Dicker, end quote, Quran 15:9, or men of Hadith. If the questioner knows that the person he is going to ask uses Rai and Qiyas, so that's opinion and reasoning by analysis, Rai and Qiyas. Oh, I just remembered, Editor Edward, what's the second letter of the Arabic alphabet? Ba. It has a numerical value of 2, and it comes from the Phoenician bet. It comes from the Semitic languages. I think they don't want to say it comes from the Hebrew. But anyway, this is the Phoenician, this is the Hebrew, this is the Arabic. Ba. Thank you, Editor Edward. Okay, so that should be up in the corner now, right? I assume it's related to bet. I don't know. I wasn't there. That's in the future. Okay, if he knows that he uses Ra'i, Qiyas, and Hadith, then he can ask the question. Okay, but when the person asked offers his opinion, he must specify if it is based on Ra'i, on Qiyas, or on Hadith. If he says it is based on Ra'i or Qiyas, the judgment should be rejected. On the other hand, if he bases it on a tradition, it should be accepted. What about gnosis? Oh, I was there. It was revealed to me directly. I mean, you gotta respect that, right? I mean, if the Quran has some authority, it's just because he's supposed to be a prophet. So if the person sitting in front of you is a prophet and they're like, radio antenna to God, yeah, okay, the answer is this. Is that your opinion? No. That's absolute objective fact, directly from the mouth of God. I just heard him say it. Then you lock that guy up. No. What? Okay. No juridical sanction applies to involuntary transgressions. Yeah. Same with emission of semen. Lord, I woke up and it was just there in my pants. I wiped it off and I don't know how it happened. I think I dreamt that I had sex, but I was like, I was watching myself do it. I wasn't in control. And Buddha's like, it's fine. As long as you weren't awake and touching it at the time, you're good. Yeah, so same thing. In unintentional things. I accidentally killed something. That was an accident, so why are you even talking to me about it? Okay, what? The Quran, involuntary transgressions or forgetfulness, except in those specific cases where the Quran or the Sunnah stipulate that there is one, and where such sanctions apply to cases like the prayer of a forgetful person or involuntary homicide. Okay. Anything about which the Sharia keeps silent has no legal status other than original licitness. The prescriptions of sacred law apply to names and states and not to beings as such. In other words, a legally obligatory act is imposed only upon the person who is capable of accepting the obligation. This applies to orders and prohibitions and to things that should and should not be done. Consequently, this law does not apply to anyone who is incapable of performing something that God has prescribed. Well, that's nice. Okay. It'd kind of suck to be like, you must stand before the such and such. Oh, but my legs, I'm in a wheelchair. It's like, well, guess you're going to burn in hell then, aren't you? No, it's okay. You can't, so it's good, right? What? Consequently, this law does not apply to anyone incapable of performing something that God has prescribed. In truth, God has imposed, quote, upon a soul only what it can do, end quote. Quran 233, 286, 652, 742, 2362. God sure repeats himself, doesn't he? Quote, and according to what has been given to it, God brings about ease, or yusr, after difficulty, or usr. Yusr and usr. Yusr, end quote, Quran 65:7. A moment.
Give me a moment.
Thank you, Sally from Third Rock from the Sun, when you were playing that Russian lady in Austin Powers 2. Give me a moment. It's been a while since I saw it, so maybe that wasn't the exact intonation. Editor Edward will have found out by now. A moment, short or long, is assigned to each act, and it is not permissible to perform it other than during the time that was assigned to it. No sooner and no later.
A wizard is never late.
Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
Yeah. Gandalf gets it. Such are the limits prescribed by God, and they should not be transgressed. Oh, how fun. Sorry. Okay, this next section, this last page of this section is called The Effort of Personal Interpretation. Personal interpretation always has the same legal status, whether it pertains to interpreting fundamental principles or to how these principles are applied. The moment God gave man the right to use personal interpretation in practical matters, he did so for the benefit of the mujtahid.
The shihad.
I had to stop. I had to finally unsubscribe from the Tabernacle. He's going on too much about talking shit about Dune. I can't deal with it. He can talk shit as much as he wants about ContraPoints, about anything else in the world. He's going a little hard on Dune. And because Frank Herbert wasn't like a communist or something. So because Frank Herbert was voting Republican in the 70s or whatever, in the 60s, and that he must be speaking unironically when he's speaking as God Emperor of Dune. And I don't know, anyway, the contrasting ideas that our food for thought are no, it's just fascist propaganda because he's a fascist Republican. Dune's fascist. If you like Dune, you're a fascist. Nah. Okay, Tabernacle, you lost me. You fell off. Not for any reason other than you went for Dune, and I don't tolerate that. Okay, where were we? He did so for the benefit of... okay. And he only states what is true. All effort in personal interpretation, in both domains, usul and furu, was founded in law. Frank Herbert was also cousins with fucking McCartney, I think, wasn't it? Not McCartney. McCarthy. I think I've got that right. And was like, cousin, hey, why don't you stop with this whole sweating too much thing that, he was famous for. And it was like, you're such a libtard, Frank, But I guess the table they were sitting at is too far away from the position that Mr. Tabernacle has. I'll stop talking about this now. It's at least as interesting as what I'm reading, but... Alright, anyway. The what was I reading? For the benefit of the he states what is true, all effort in interpretation in both domains, usul and furu, was founded in law. Okay. So you're legally, that's the thing, is you're legally allowed. The law says that you should interpret the law to come up with the law. So if somebody comes up with a different law than the one you came up with, their law is legal if they're in their own domain and you're in yours. It's sort of like, if a person finds a rock and interprets the scratchings on the bottom of it to be a message from a bodhisattva left there 800 years earlier, then you are now a treasure finder or a turton and never mind. So if it's written in, like Catholicism was like, no new revelations, and they were like, well, whenever, whatever, yeah. Oh, we'll take it on a case by case. Do you have the rock? No? Okay. Describe the rock to me. Okay. You can build your temple over there. What? The mujtahid who does not succeed in discovering what has been prescribed by God or his messengers in regard to a given question commits an involuntary error, according to a hadith, and he will consequently receive only one reward. God nevertheless makes the answer that his personal effort has led him to lawful. He is consequently rewarded, even though his answer does not, in the eyes of God, conform to the truth, since God has made the answer lawful for the mujtahid. Now God affirms nothing that is false. If the mujtahid later learns of a prescription from God or his messenger on the issue with information different from what he was originally thinking, and if he also learns that this prescription came chronologically later than the one upon which he based his reasoning, he must give up his earlier position, and it would be illicit to hold it. This is why Malik B. Anas was showing knowledge, faith, and great scrupulousness when questioned about a problem of a religious nature. He asked, quote, "Is the case about which you are inquiring," in bracket parentheses, "asked concretely?" End quote. If the answer was affirmative, he offered his opinion. But if the reply was that this case had not really come up, and that it was thus purely theoretical, he did not answer. It is because of this that scholars have said that, in a way, any mujtahid gives a reply just since either his answer coincides exactly with God's decision on the issue, or at least it coincides with God's decision regarding the person who has not found the correct answer and has thus involuntarily erred. The above entails the basic principles of canon law to the extent a book of this sort allows, as a complete study is not possible here. Okay. That's the end of the section. The next section is called Satan's Ruses. Shatan, or whatever they would call him. And then there's some Ibn Arabi stuff. Should we dive into that? Yeah. Let's put our toe into Satan's ruses, shall we? Okay, so there's italics. Michel Chodquitz now talking from France 30, 40 years ago, whenever. Section the fourth of the Futuhat's 6 sections. The section devoted to the spiritual abodes. This chapter begins by returning to a previously encountered theme, when they prefer their personal opinion or the opinion of the founder of their school to the only truly decisive proofs. The Quran and the Hadith, the Fuqaha, are the toys and tools of Satan. When the person prefers the personal opinions or the opinions of their leader to the factual, what God said, right? Then Quran and Hadith are merely tools and toys of Satan, which is something we should probably be like, oh no, that's not good, right? You don't want He-Man's sword being a tool or a toy of Skeletor, do you? No, absolutely not. That upsets me beyond belief, because I grew up watching He-Man. Equivalent. Sorry, no. Yeah, let's just roll with it here. The particular climate of Andalusian conformist Malikism, okay, during the time of Ibn Arabi's youth probably explains some of the rigor of this condemnation, okay. But we shall see that the Eastern Fuqaha were not spared to any greater extent. In the early pages of chapter 88, the author laconically mentioned the light the Quran promises the God-fearing. He is more explicit here, with specific details regarding the forms that divine assistance can take in illuminating the men of the path, and sending them just solutions without their needing recourse to erudite research or speculation. Ibn Arabi speaks from experience and says so. Several pages in the Shaykh's work are devoted to the inspiration God grants to his saints. But in this passage we find phenomenological details not encountered elsewhere that shed considerable light on the central role the law plays in Ibn Arabi's esotericism. As was the case in the preceding chapter, this chapter highlights the inexhaustibility of divine mercy by offering a subtle analysis of pardon. or Migfira. Oh, that was the end of the Michel Chodquits. Now we're in the Ibn Arabi, in the section about Satan or whatever. Satan's playthings. Ruses. Abrogation of the law by the desires of the soul. Assholes like this would probably have a lot to say about, like, progressive laws and changing of laws. Like, marriage, it's between whoever. Yeah, if you love each other and, they'd be like, ugh. I assume. It just seems that kind of thing. Like, the Bible, they're pointing at a different Bible, but it's that same, like, the Bible says Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Let's separate church and state, shall we? Anyway, no, okay, let's just, okay. We're in Damascus. It's 1200. These things make sense. This is as far as humanity has gotten thus far, and as far as some places will be in 2026 as well. But no, it's good. It's like Martin Luther. I mean, I have to admit, Martin Luther at the time was revolutionary, and so was this at the time, and then now it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's an old script. Could we please not keep using these old scripts? I mean, the new, there's things to criticize about the way we do things today, but at least it's not the Bible said, the Quran said. I mean, except for the people that are like, what? It should be, though. I mean, it's the true word of God, so why would we do it? It's Satan telling you that you should pay attention to your common sense or to how things have changed and evolved in humanity. I think the stained glassing of things, like you can be channeling divine wisdom, but you're going to inadvertently put your own thing on it. So the values that you have in your moment in time and place can't help ending up on the page as well. So you got to do some discernment. You just got to. Holding a text as like 100% flawless and sacred and unquestionable has got to stop. I don't know. That's my opinion. I forget the Arabic word for opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just read like a paragraph of this satanic stuff. It's the title, the Satan's Ruses, right? Okay. Abrogation of the law by the desires of the soul. Know, my close friend, that regarding this issue, it was reported to us by Ibn Allah B. Abbas that a man who had slandered him came to request that the act be rendered licit. Quote, O Ibn Abbas, end quote, he said, quote, I have slandered you, make it licit for me. Okay. End quote, Ibn Abbas replied, quote, May God keep me from making licit that which he has forbidden. In truth, God has forbidden attacking the honor of Muslims. I will thus not make it licit. May God forgive you, however, end quote. Now, note how admirable such a course of action is, and how thorough his knowledge is. In a similar line, there is an oath by which one commits to do or not to do anything licit. God has thus made fulfilling oaths obligatory. All this is part of progressive changes of degree, and the divine ruse from which only the individual God has preserved by calling his attention to the danger is preserved. There is no lawgiver other than God. May he be exalted. God told his prophet, quote, bracket parentheses, we revealed the book with truth to you, and bracket parentheses, so that you might judge among men according to what God has you see, end quote. Quran 4:105. He did not say, quote, according to what you see, end quote. Moreover, he reprimanded the Prophet when he declared Mary the Copt to be illicit for him because of the oath he took during the time of the dispute with Aisha and Hafsa, asking him, quote, O Prophet, why do you declare illicit what God has made licit? Simply to give satisfaction to your wives? End quote. Quran 66:1. This is part of what his own soul showed the Prophet. Okay. All right. So, even though it's a bit of a silly thing, I'll just finish this section. There's like only 2 small paragraphs left. So here is an indication that the divine words, quote, according to what God has you see, end quote, really mean, quote, what he inspires in the Prophet, end quote, and not, quote, what he sees by himself, end quote. But if in matters pertaining to religion, we took personal opinion into account, the opinion of the Prophet would be superior to that of anyone else. If such were the case for the Prophet, however, in regard to what his soul showed him, what would happen to the person who, not being infallible, has a better chance of erring than of being correct? Okay. This also shows that the ijtihad God's messenger speaks of consists solely in seeking proof in order to determine the legal status applicable to a question that is asked. It does not consist in legalizing on the question, since that is not authorized by God. Okay. All right. So, those who've been with us for a while know that there was some good stuff in Volume 1. I'm not saying there isn't good stuff even in what we're reading right now. It's just kind of, it takes a little bit of patience and a lack of reactivity to see through the very arcane, depending on where you're coming from. Maybe there's somebody watching for whom, God gave us the law, and the best we can do is try to figure out what he meant when he said it, or whatever. Or, it's on the page, it's on the Bible, it's on the Quran. Some folks might be coming from that position as, well, yes, I believe this, that is true. And it's like, okay, so there's that. But ignoring that. Yeah, looking at it and kind of seeing, all right, there's an interesting approach here, is a very different experience for me than certain times in the past where he was like getting really deep and talking about levels of heaven and the nature of self and the interplay between the temporal entities that come into existence within the ongoing isness of divinity. And, this is kind of like, whoa, okay, wow. So, like, now we're on to another chapter. And again, I can't thank myself enough for having decided to read the Vinaya Pitaka, because that's the part that most people who, in reference to, ancient Buddhist literature will say, don't waste your time with that. But I've been wasting my time with it, and it's not a waste of time, because it's the classic example for me personally, because of the bias, the cognitive bias that I have growing up with Buddhist statues around the house, and my dad identifying as Buddhist and meditating with my dad, and my association with all of that. Never was in any way connected with, something as boring as sitting in a courtroom, trying to figure out what the founding fathers meant when they, you know what I mean? Like, that's like, whoa, that's over here, and then meditating with my dad is over here, but reading the Vinaya Pitaka is kind of like, oh, these two things, there's a shared space. And similarly, there's a space where a medieval Middle Eastern, you know, like approach toward divine law is occupying the same space and the same mind as these really deep, profound ideas that are kind of more reminiscent of the poetry of Hafiz. And so that's interesting, not saying that that's food for thought in itself. So, yeah. Is it useful today? Maybe, maybe not. I think that the one umbrella usefulity, I don't know, is that, you know, it might help for one or two people who watch this to humanize what the groupthink tends to categorize as the other, and you know, to recognize one's own reflection in the mirror. I think that the shittiest people in the groupthink of people who speak in a similar manner as I do in English, with something vaguely resembling my accent, in other words, the shittiest ones are the ones who on to whatever degree and on whatever level believe in Christianity or Judaism, or I should say, against Islam, as this is sacred, this is a perversion of what's sacred, this was revealed by God, this is... So they're the shittiest of all. And being so shitty, they do shitty things that result in retaliation, and then they forget the shitty thing they did and only look at the retaliation and then say, oh my God, this just goes to show how shitty these people are. Not only is their religion a load of crap, but then can you believe they did 9/11, you know? Obviously it wasn't all 2 billion people, it was 19 of them, but yeah, that was in retaliation for the U.S.'s continued support of Israel. So, and that was the stated reason that bin Laden gave when he did that. And then George Bush said, it's because they had our freedom. I can't do a good George W. Bush. But the point is that if you come away from this with a little bit more of, not blowing, not any illusions about, no, the things that they say are bad about Sharia law are indeed bad about Sharia law, but that also applies to the people who want to push toward more theocratic rule in places like the United States, where, you know, we need to make this legal, make this illegal because of the Bible. The Bible says there's no room in the Bible for that. That's called Sharia law. That's the Christian version of Sharia law, which, if it is better at all, isn't much better. And I think there's an argument to be made that it's not better at all. It's maybe worse in some cases. So what's the point? I don't know. No, it's no point. It just is what it is. It's the green pedal. It's what the green pedal is doing today, different from what the green pedal is Meccan Revelations. That's the green pedal. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's 5 petals, 5 colors. I was thinking of making, Meccan Revelations is the only thing that's ever been on the green pedal. The Black Books is going to end pretty soon, sooner than the Meccan Revelations, even though this is 2 volumes and that's 7 volumes. The most of those books is photocopies of the handwritten, and then the little translation is just a few pages at the end usually. So, yeah. So the white pedal has had like 5 different books on it. So now there's a playlist called the white pedal. But it would be silly for me to make a green pedal playlist, because that would just be the Meccan Revelations. It's the only thing that's been on there. But I think we're gonna have this Fusus al-Hikam. And once we start reading that, then maybe it'll make sense to have a green pedal playlist. So those are things that'll come up in the future. I might make a purple pedal playlist that has been Teilhard de Chardin and Nag Hammadi only, just those 2 things. an orange petal, Martin Luther and Divine Pymander. And then it's going to be other things. I mean, Divine Pymander is going to end pretty soon. And then I'll have to decide, like, do I make a new playlist? Do I call it each thing we're reading? Do I call it Chaldean Oracles when we read Chaldean Oracles? When I mean, obviously, I'm not going to call it all Divine Pymander, so. But I'm probably going to be lazy and just leave the Greek Pymander on the orange part of the orange for as we're reading all this Hermeticism stuff. Because Pymander is, the name thing and all that. So. What are we talking about? Nothing important. Just sort of vague reflection and de-scrying and what's the word? I think that having quit caffeine and nicotine, like something like words elude me a little bit more. Like my brain got so used to using those neurotransmitters that it needs to readjust to using just the neurotransmitters that are available. So debrief, I don't know, something like that, some word or other. So, all right. If you're here, I'm interested and curious to know who would watch and listen to this entire episode in particular. Feel free to say hello in the description below, and if there was anything that you liked about today's episode, if you wouldn't mind letting me know. I'm just like putting it out there because I'm curious. Because with an episode like this, I have to completely get over any sense of wanting it to be good for anybody, because it's not good for me. But I'm not like, it doesn't bother me that it's not good. I mean, it is good. That's the thing. I know it's good, and I guess I'm trying to clarify why I think that it's good. It's not great. It's not like the greatest thing. It's not the most interesting. Obviously, it's very, very, very down toward the bottom of the list of interesting things there are to talk and think about. But yeah. But it wasn't like absolutely terrible. And it was a little bit interesting to see Ibn Arabi's reasoning on, like, okay, so that's how you arrive at that. If you assume that, the truth with a capital T comes from, Muhammad through the Quran and then the Hadith and everything, okay, that's a big assumption. But within that egregore, within that assumption, well, how do you conclude this? Well, I don't work that way. Other people do. It's okay for them to do it. I just don't do it. And it's interesting to see Ibn Arabi's process within that. So, all right, anyway, because I like Ibn Arabi already because of other reasons, because of his, like, poetic way of describing profound ideas. All right, so next time we're going to be back over on Buddhist Books Podcast with the Tipitaka, and then when we come back here, it's going to be Frater BT doing Carl Jung, and you know what that means. That means it's going to open up with a musical number and the putting of cards up on the screen and all that, the whole black and yellow thing that he does. So this has been the Christmas color episode. Next time is the black and yellow episode. Last time was the Scottish flag episode, let's say. It's blue and white. And, yeah. Okay. I'm done. I'm all out of stuff to ramble about. And, I give this episode a 4.5. 4 out of 10. But with a smile. It's a good 4 out of 10. It has its place. If everything was a 10 out of 10, nothing would be a 10 out of 10, right? Till next time. Bingo!